Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is writing research and teaching statements for academic jobs. So without any further ado, let me throw it over to you, Dr. Yoka Bradt, to introduce yourself and your panel and take it away.
Yeah. And hello, Kristen. I hope that you will not be the only one. I was just saying some people are in class till 12 o'clock, so may trickle in a little later. So, and if you are the only one, wow, you're going to get a lot of questions to ask and a lot of personalized attention. But I believe we at least have a bunch of other people registered, so we'll see if they show up. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So, we have three wonderful people here today to talk about their experience writing these statements, as well as some of them reviewing these statements. Like one of the people speaking today, Ben, has been on on several search committees, so he can also speak about receiving many of these statements and kind of what stands out or what were some of the pitfalls that he noticed. So today with us, we have Dr. Sudeshna Chatterjee, and she will be speaking second, right, Dr. Chatterjee? Yes. And first will be Justine Sefcik. She will be introducing us with, or starting us off with a presentation about general information of what should go in these statements, what people are looking for. And Dr. Sefcik is a assistant professor in graduate nursing. And then we'll have Benjamin Binder-Markey, and he is an assistant professor in physical therapy and rehabilitation sciences. So we have Carol Ann joining us as well. And just so that the presenters know, Kristen, both of them are in creative arts therapies. Kristen is a PhD student and Carol Ann is a postdoc. So, all right, Justine, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share my slides with the caveat that I took all that information off of. Oh, okay. So Sudeshna's information is correct there. I didn't double check it.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody. It's good to see you all.
Just so you know, Justine, sorry, we see now your slides and presentation view.
Did it fix?
There we go. Now we see it fine. Great.
Oh, my computer's stuttering.
And now it's presentation mode again.
Is it good now?
Now it's good.
Okay,
yes.
Great. All of a sudden it did a little stutter. Of course, when you need it, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, thank you everybody for coming today and listening to this recording. Today, I'm going to just do a general overview of writing research and teaching statements for academic jobs. So this is very general. So you're going to want to keep in mind your own fields and what you're seeking. So if it's a tenure track position, a teaching track position, maybe a research associate position, or even a postdoctoral research fellow, there'll be some differences in how you apply for these different positions, but we'll give you a general overview. So when you're writing a research statement, your goal is to create a compelling research statement that effectively showcases your expertise, interest, and potential as a future faculty member or postdoctoral research fellow. So you really want to make yourself shine. And depending on your field, it might be very competitive to land a position. So you really want your documents that you submit to help get you to the front of the line to get in for an interview. So you really want to focus on writing strong statements. Of course, if this is relevant for the position you're applying for, if you're research relevant. And so the first thing I would say to everybody is make sure you understand the job requirements. Really pay attention to those details that are in the advertisements that come out and how they describe the position, because you really want to customize your research statement to each institution that you apply for. And having been on different search committees, you can really see when you get a statement that is very templated, that it looks like they're using it through different universities, versus when you could tell that somebody's taken the time to really write to the institution, they've done some of their research. So I would recommend doing your homework and making that show in your research statement. And you really want to highlight your research expertise. So you'd start by introducing your backgrounds and expertise and really highlighting your key accomplishments. So publications that you've had, grants, awards, anything under review. I would really try to highlight that to show that you are a shining star and you are somebody that the university wants to have. And then you want to emphasize how your research aligns with the focus of whether it's the college or school or department. So there are some universities currently that are doing cluster hires. And so they'll advertise that if they're looking for, let's say, people who work in the broad area of aging. And you'll see that on advertisements. And so you'd want to emphasize how your research fits into that if that's the case. And there's all other types of clusters that are happening now. And sometimes they're just looking for somebody who could come in and fit a hole that they have. So you really read that document well that they post for the job postings. And also if you can do a little networking and see if there's anybody at that institution already, that could give you a little insight into how you can polish up your statement before you put it in. So it's always good to network, talk to people, and also talk to your peers. So keep in mind that anybody that you're interacting with in your PhD program or your postdoc, they're going on to other positions in the future. And you want to keep in touch with them because they could give you some advice in terms of their own job search and what works for them. So back to writing your strong research statements. So you want to outline your research agenda. And again, this is if the position is calling for it. So you would write about your research interest and your goals for the future, describe the questions you want to address, methodologies you plan to use, potential impacts of your work. And for some applications, like when I applied for a T32 postdoc, I actually had to come up with a mini grant that I had to submit with my application. So I had to really think through what my next steps were. So that might be something that you'll have to get working on. So the other thing you might want to write about is your ongoing projects and how they fit into your broader research agenda. And then in terms of helping you stand out in the job pool, you want to demonstrate how you're innovative and what is really significant about the work. So showcase your creativity and your originality, highlight what sets you apart, and explain why your work is important. The other thing you might want to consider when writing these statements is to address the feasibility and resources. So going back to doing your homework about the institution, do you know if they have specific facilities or equipment already that you would be able to use if you were to get a position? Are there potential collaborators there? Have you already collaborated with somebody at that university? You're going to want to add that into your letter because it'll show that you have a good working relationship with other faculty there. And then it's so important to write clearly and concisely. And I know a few people on the call today have been in some of my grant writing classes. We want to make sure we're getting our points across very clearly. We want to make sure that we're proofreading, checking there's no typos. Some people are very averse to reading some paperwork that could be sloppy with typos and weird spacing drives me crazy. So you want to show that you really polished your papers in before you submit them. So make sure you're proofreading them and get feedback. So that could be from your mentor, or I have a group of peers when we're applying for things, we send our documents to each other to get feedback. So everybody's just understood that we're going to help each other. And so we provide feedback as best we can. So that was research statements. So now teaching statements. The goal of writing a strong teaching statement is to create a compelling statement that showcases your passions for teaching, your effectiveness as an instructor, and your commitment to student success. And when you're writing these statements, you want to reflect on your teaching philosophy because that should be the foundation of your statement. You'll write about your values and beliefs about teaching and learning, and what strategies have you used to engage students and promote learning. And I do have to say that here at Drexel, we have a really great teaching and learning center, and they provide consultations to faculty, staff, and students. And so if you are working on a teaching philosophy, you could actually make an appointment with them to get some feedback. So that's a great resource. And there's a ton of information on the internet about how to write a teaching philosophy. And sometimes you have to be creative. So if you don't have a lot of experience as a teaching assistant, have you done workshops with a conference? Have you worked with a mentor on something? And you can really, think out of the box and craft your statement. And if you do have that classroom teaching experience, what would be expected in these teaching statements is a description of the courses that you taught, who were the students that you were teaching. So were they undergrads, graduates? And was there anything innovative that you put into your teaching practices? And think about giving concrete examples, because that will help your statements really stand out. You want to emphasize your student-centered approaches. These are like buzzwords in the teaching field. You want to make sure you're doing active teaching, engaging those students. And when you're writing, you're talking about how you're getting your students to think critically and how you are creating an inclusive environment for your students. And then you want to talk about what strategies you've used to help your students learn and promote those learning outcomes. And again, concrete examples are really going to catch readers' attention when they're looking over your statements. And also, if you could demonstrate a reflective practice. So when you get teaching evals, or if there's something that you've done to improve your teaching, that could be something that you write about. And again, I think having a consultation with the Teaching and Learning Center is an excellent way to go about this. They even, for faculty, they give us consultations when we're working on our midpoint review and when we're putting in promotion material. A really great source of feedback that we could gather from them. And then in your statements, if you could talk about how, if you are looking for a position that has a research focus to it, how does your teaching connect to your research and vice versa? So if there's a way that you could tie that in creatively, that will catch people's attention. So for instance, if you are in the field of creative art therapy, for instance, I know we have some people on the call for there, and you have an expertise with your research in qualitative research, that might be something that you could offer to the institution, that you could teach classes in that area that you have some expertise. And then again, you really want to tailor your statements to the institution, read over their missions, their values, their educational goals. A lot of this you can find right on their websites. And make sure that your statements align with their priorities and their expectations for teaching. And then the same as research statements, you want to proofread, get feedback, and revise. So it is an iterative process. So I'm going to stop with the slides now and just open it up to the rest of the panel. And we are particularly interested in people's questions. So if there's any burning questions, we'd love to take them. You could put them in the chat if you would like, or unmute, I guess.
Yeah, we're just a small group, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions at this point about either the teaching or the research statement. Go ahead, Kristen. Yeah.
You spoke a bit about how for like postdoc positions, this might look a little different. And I know that you did a postdoc. So I'm curious if there's anything you think would be especially important to include or to kind of highlight when you're writing those kinds of statements.
Sure. So I actually had completed 2 postdocs. So I'm going to think back. And the first one, I mentioned a little bit earlier that I actually had to come up with a research plan. So I had to think about that. And it really helped me to talk to people who are part of that research center ahead of time to see what they're expecting. And the other thing that was really different from a faculty position. So this is for a very specific research center. They wanted an outline for the 4 quarters. So the position was for a year, and then depending on whether you're successful and all of that, they would offer you a second year. So I actually had to map out all of the activities that I would do over each quarter to help me as a postdoctoral research fellow. And I'm sure if you want that, I could probably find that in my files. But I think it was like if there was extra coursework that I was going to take, if there was a particular expert that I wanted to meet with, like I really had to think through what I would do to be a successful postdoc for that first year with my application. So that's very different from a faculty position.
It reminds
But
me
I
of,
almost go
okay.
ahead, Kristen.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of the training section that
Yes.
worked on for grant writing. So
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And this was a federally funded postdoc. So that's why they were with the T32. So they were looking for it to be very explicit. Now, once you got selected, it didn't mean you had to do every single thing that you planned out, because things change, your timelines change, but they wanted to see that you were thinking ahead. They also wanted to know publications on the horizon. They wanted to see that you were going to put in your effort and be productive. Yoka, I think there was something you wanted to add there.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
I'm just going to add something real quick. It kind of depends on how your postdoc is being funded. So if, like Justine, if you're applying for a T32 fellowship or something, you have to have a really strong research statement or a research plan, because it's a training grant, right? You're asking the NIH for money to help you train in a particular area. But then there are also some positions that are funded through an R21, usually not R21, but usually like a bigger grant, like an R01 or a UO1. So these are like ongoing projects, and these are huge projects. So at that time, the PI would look at your CV. They might still ask you to submit. They usually ask you to submit a research statement just to see like what your goals are, and do your skills and your future goals align with what the direction that the lab is going towards. So in this case, the expectation is that you would be able to jump into the project and, take lead. Like they will give you certain sections that you're responsible for. So the requirements are going to be a little different. I'm saying, but I'm not saying that at that same time you will not be pursuing your own research goals. You will be. But again, do realize that if you're being funded through an R01 or a UO1 kind of grant, your first priority would be making sure that the project, is completed in a timely manner. Scientific dissemination and things like that. At the same time, you can carve a piece of that project for yourself, and then maybe that can be your future direction. Both ways, like it works both ways. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that there are so many different varieties. So even when I had done a 1-year postdoc here at Drexel, I really had to write about how this was a good fit for me. And also for the team. So what expertise was I bringing to the team, and why this environment? Why did I want to be in this environment? So that's something that you have to write to.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question about teaching statements. I'm not at the point of submitting anything for teaching statements, but I was just wondering how you would frame, or if you've seen how people frame teaching statements without a ton of teaching experience. So I was a TA, but I was really just executing the class, I felt like, not really like making it my own, because I was given the curriculum. So I'd love to hear your suggestions.
Do you want to go first, Justine? So I can add to that. So I was a teaching assistant for 5 years at the University of Florida. I was not in charge of the main class, but then I did a lot of teaching in the lab. And it was not like, the primary instructor, the professor for that class was always there, but then I would take some sections and I would, drive it. So one thing I would say is like, if you can create opportunities for yourself, like I'm going to lead this, like there has to be some proactivity. Is that even a word? Yeah. You have to be a little bit proactive with that, and look for opportunities, to, own opportunities. I need an opportunity. I'm going to take this and then I'm going to teach this section. The other thing is like get feedback from the professors. What went right with your class, what didn't. I think you mentioned that you were executing the class. That's a really don't underestimate that. That's a huge skill, because if you've done labs or even if you've run classes, you know how time management is a huge thing. There is only so much amount of time and you need to go through a lot of material. So you've been able to do that very successfully. That's a huge skill. And even in your faculty positions, that's going to help you. There are also some universities that do student evaluations for teaching assistants too. I don't know if that's the case for the courses that you have been a part of. If not, I would say your faculty mentor or whoever is the primary instructor, maybe get feedback from.
And it might be a little brainstorming too with somebody just to run by, to think about how to make this experience shine. And I agree completely what Sudeshna said. And also, if you were grading, that is a huge responsibility and a great way to become an expert in teaching is learning how to give feedback to other students. You're probably dealing with student issues and helping navigate them through the course. So you're probably answering emails and addressing their concerns. You might have incorporated feedback into the course based on the problems that the students brought to your attention. So I think you could really play it up to, what your actual experience was. And if it was a very large class, that's a unique skill set that other people might not have, versus if it was a smaller seminar, that also you help develop a newer skill set. So I think you certainly can play it up, your experience as a TA.
Yeah, I would say that list your responsibilities. My responsibility was grading. My responsibility was making sure that the class was ready to begin when the primary instructor came in, or, whatever your responsibilities are, and then expand on that. Because, like on the face value, you think that, oh, I'm just, I'm responsible for the day-to-day management of this class. It's a huge skill. I can tell you that if the TA is not good, that class is not going to succeed. Things are going to fall. And it's the same for research too. We really need strong research assistants who are actually interested in the project. We need good TAs who are actually interested in the coursework. It's not just one more thing that you have to check off. So always know that you have the skills. You just need to make sure that you write these statements in a way that the person who's reading them understands it. Do not leave anything to imagination. You have to spell it out for people. I did this, and this helped me develop this skill. So like Justine said, make sure you emphasize on that.
And I will add, Ali, also use the big kind of the buzzwords, right, that are important. Grading is important. Course management. So don't say, oh, I was responsible for taking attendance. Call it course management, because you probably were more, had bigger responsibilities than just attendance or answering emails. Being responsive to student feedback, and maybe give a few examples of how you've done that. And don't forget that for many of these, for the tenure track positions, their main interest is that you will be successful in research. They want you to be, typically to be tenured, you need to show excellent in 2 areas, but it could be research and service. It doesn't have to be research and teaching. So research is going to be their priority, making sure that you will be successful, that you come in with a focused research agenda, and that they can be confident that you will be successful bringing in external funding. That's kind of the main priority. And if you have some teaching experience that then you can describe beautifully, that will be fine. There are many, many people starting on a tenure track position who have no teaching experience. So, great question.
One other avenue, and I see Drexel has this, they have a non-credit certificate in college teaching that's available for graduate students and postdocs. And that's something I did as a pre-doctoral research fellow. I went through the certificate program, and then I could put it in my application materials. That's something that I did. And it's usually not a cost to the person doing it. It's something offered through the university.
Yeah, and I don't know if Drexel still offers their online teaching certificate program. It's a summer, like a 6 weeks intensive or so. And I know I had one of my PhD students apply for that. It's competitive, like not everybody gets accepted. And she got in and she loved it. And it was super informative. And again, it's something that you can put on your CV. So yeah, like Sudeshna said, looking for opportunities is a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so helpful.
Sudeshna, I'm not sure if you have things to add to what Justine, the recommendations that Justine made in terms of the teaching, or some examples that you can give, or you, Justine, you said at certain points it's important to give concrete examples. So maybe if we can speak to some of examples that might be helpful, or like what a research plan, like what do you mean by that? Like how big or how long term of a research plan? Sudeshna?
Sure. So I kind of wanted to circle back to the teaching, and while you were talking, I was kind of thinking about this. I think communication is also a huge part of, being a teaching assistant. Sometimes the students will come to you because they may not feel very comfortable approaching the professor to explain them concepts and ideas. And you're the one who's actually doing the explaining to them at times. This also translates very well to research because, listen to presentations. I think there are very few researchers who can actually convey, the outcome of their research or the main point of their research in simple words, so that even somebody who's not an expert in that field can understand it. So what I'm trying to say is, during your PhD, you have acquired the skills. Every day you're training on some skill, whether you know it, whether you're consciously doing it or unconsciously. So make sure you kind of make sure that comes across in your statement. So coming back to the question of giving concrete examples, this could be one. I developed communication skills. I have helped students come up with solutions or help them understand the content. And now kind of switching to research, I know we had a conversation about, make it very clear in your statement, this is my research plan. Sometimes the research statement might require you to write down a plan for the first 3 years. What are the first 3 years? What projects will you be going after? Make sure you're very clear about that. Don't go into too many details, but just give them a broad overview. This is what I want to do. And then, so I work with ethnias. In my research statement, I talked about using functional near-infrared spectroscopy to assess brain activity. So whoever is reading it knows that, okay, if we have to discuss a startup package with her or something, this equipment has to be a part of it. So just being strategic about what are the things that you will be requiring, and make sure that you incorporate that in your goals, in concrete examples, this is what I will be collecting, or this is the data that I'm going to pursue. The other thing is, we need to work as a community. So yeah, it's good to stand out. This is my area of expertise. But at the same time, I think that was something that Justine too mentioned in her presentation. How will you collaborate with other people? You are not on an island, right? This is a community. You're going to work with other people. Yes, you have your area of expertise that sets you apart. But then how are you also going to form the collaboration so that your department and the university can function as a community? So just make sure that you give them those specific, very concrete statements.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I think I could add something for teaching, because this is something I just got coached with a little, doing a program with the Teaching and Learning Center. And so, for instance, if you say in your application materials that you believe in active learning and engaging your students, give specific examples of how you do that in your classroom, because anybody could put those buzzwords in. And so, for instance, I would take, for example, one class that I would teach, and what is the structure of that 3-hour class? So there's a little bit of a lecture component, there's a hands-on activity, and I would describe what that looks like. There might be a guest lecture, there might be a discussion over a reading, small group discussion. So giving some real concrete examples of how, if this was the if you're writing about how you engage your students, this is the way, and making it clear that it's just not a pure lecture class that you would be giving if you say that you're engaging your students in the classroom.
And really important to that, as you're all listening to this, of the kind of content that Sudeshna and Justine are suggesting you put in there. At the same time, don't forget about the very important advice that Justine gave you. Keep it concise. And I know that when Ben joins us, he will talk about this as well, but I certainly have reviewed my share of teaching and research statements. And know that in some searches, I forget who I recently spoke to in the college or another college, and they had just started to receive applications for the positions. They had 130 already. So people are now, of course, we're not going to read research and teaching statements of all 130. Typically, they look at your CV first, and if you're already not meeting some basic requirements, that already maybe discards like a third of the applicant pool. But otherwise, so we might be left with 60 or 70 applications that we need to read, and I promise you that these committees are not going to read 3 pages of each research and teaching. I would say, 2 pages each, probably max. Because the problem is, if you make it long, you really run the risk that they're not going to read it carefully. They're going to start skimming, and now they might miss some of the most important points you made just because you made it too lengthy. And with that, as a perfect segue to introduce Dr. Binder-Markey, hello. We actually just started talking about, so far it's been a lot about kind of advice and answering some questions of the people in attendance. But I told them that when you would join us, Ben, that you would talk about some of your perceptions, having reviewed many of these applications or these statements, and maybe some observations that you can share as to what made some stand out, what were some major faux pas or kind of pitfalls that you've seen.
Yeah,
so welcome.
No, absolutely. Hello, everyone. I think exactly like you were saying, but right before I caught the end of it, was don't make them too long, because exactly like you were saying, you're going to start skimming and you're going to get through. So I would say 2 pages max. Maybe, especially if you're kind of thinking about the research statement. With the research statement, don't just talk about what you've done. We want to know, especially as part of a committee, what your vision is kind of to move forward. And I think part of Justine's presentation prior was about kind of tailor it to the institution. We want to know how you would fit into the institution, how your research would complement what's going on. And, a great way to do that is actually to tell us how it would complement what's going on. So do your research into the actual institution, or if, maybe you're bringing a new line of research into that institution, how that would pair or expand really that institution's ability, whether it's just in the department, the college, or the university in general, kind of. And I think telling about how you fit into the general landscape as well is really important. What are some things, and I think to note about the research statement is we're not going to hold you accountable for everything that you say in the research statement. We want to make sure that you can think logically and actually create a compelling story. I think that's actually more important than actually saying, okay, what you've put in the research statement is exactly what you're going to do for the next 5 years of your life. I think that's, when we're looking at these, we say, okay, this is their kind of idea, and also giving us as a research, I almost said admissions committee, because that's another hat I wear as well. It's like, as a tenure track faculty search committee, what we're looking is, okay, can we also figure out how you would fit in as well? So giving us enough information to see how you may not see connections. And, it's not always, I don't think you have to know what all the connections are, but telling us enough about your ideas and where you want to go so that we say, okay, I see how that person could fit in here and there. So I get more what I was we were doing a tenure track search. So we were really heavily focused on that research statement. Now, the teaching statement, if you're going for a more teaching position, probably holds a lot more weight. But really for a research position, we want to make sure that you have and a lot of individuals actually don't have a whole lot of teaching experience, especially if they're coming in from a postdoc. It's just, do you have some sort of framework that you like to work from? And we don't expect, especially on a research side of it, your pedagogy to be completely solidified or really know, because you're coming in to be a tenure track researcher, more or less. You're not coming in to teach. Teach is what you will do as well, but it's not the primary function of that job. Whereas if you're going for a teaching faculty job, that will be the primary. And I'm guessing that would have a lot more emphasis on there as well. And the research would have would have a diminished emphasis as well. That's kind of, so again, tailor it to the university and then put your emphasis on what the position actually, and kind of asking about what the breakdown of that position as well, whether you put more effort into that teaching statement or into the research statement.
Thank you. Any other kind of big no-nos that you have seen in either research or teaching statements?
Yeah. I think almost going too broad and generic is, saying I could do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that. Be focused. We want to make sure that you can focus. And a big no-no is only talking about what you've done and not talking about what you will do. I think that's more important, is really this research statement should be, or these statements should be what you're going to do.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. One thing that I've noticed in, especially in teaching statements, kind of a big no-no is to not just throw around buzzwords. And that's why Justine said, and Sudeshna also talked about giving concrete examples. And it's not like your teaching statement, for every buzzword that you use that you have to give an example. But it's so obvious when somebody just read online what are some of the current important things about teaching, and so now putting in all those buzzwords, and it's just all fluff and there's nothing really concrete. Because then it will do harm in two ways. One, you might not get selected, right? But if you do get selected, I would certainly be somebody on the search committee then to throw those buzzwords at you and say, okay, can you now talk about these things concretely? And then we have had people who are like, and you can see that they're starting to think about, what should I now, and they may not have examples ready. So that was definitely a big no that or something that is just frustrating to see. And then for the research statement, like you said earlier, Ben, be focused both in your teaching and your research statement. But we have certainly also seen research statements that are kind of all over the place, come in with 4 really different ideas. And that's a big flag. That is somebody who's not focused yet, who doesn't know yet what they want to do. And in order to be successful in getting external funding, you need to create a clear path for yourself. Yeah, you may have some other interests, but maybe don't share them all if you have all these other interests. Maybe pick 1 or 2 interests, but you want to show a clear focus. Otherwise, they're afraid you're going to be somebody who's going to, what I call, chase the dollars. They see a grant. Ooh, that kind of is interesting. Let me do this. And now, let's do that. And so they never, build a track record of success in a particular area, and therefore might never be successful in getting major funding. Other questions that people have? No, we have a quiet group. No, they weren't so quiet before. We have a small group also, so therefore less questions maybe. I can also say, since we have 2 creative arts therapy people here today that work jobs in creative arts therapy, we have kind of a confusing system in that many of the tenure track positions that are advertised are actually what in many universities would be called teaching positions. And they are teaching positions and they're still tenure track, but because they're often, at least in music therapy in the School of Music, there is much less expectation of research. And so you may not even be asked to submit a research statement. So if they don't ask for it, you don't have to submit it, of course. And so then there's certainly much more emphasis on teaching and service even. I've never seen any university ask for a service statement, but then in your cover letter, you may want to really address how how you've served your national association, for example, or how you're out there presenting at conferences, even though you're not maybe having a big active research agenda, because those are the two things that they really would be looking for. If they do ask for a research statement, and you know that maybe from colleagues who work at that institution that they mostly have teaching positions and they don't get a lot of release time for research, I would say still put in a good research statement with a clear plan, really emphasize potential funding sources, show that you have done your homework, because that will put you in a negotiation position, you know, when you go for interview and then when you're hopefully offered the job, to say, okay, here is what I want to do. Here is my research plan. And if you give me release time, this is the path that I would create, and it will be worth your dollars because I will be bringing in, you know, potentially these kind of dollars. So in our fields, it's a little bit more about educating people sometimes in these schools of music. What does it mean to get external funding, and how would that benefit them in terms of, you know, now your salary not costing as much to them?
Yeah, something that you just mentioned, that putting in the sources of funding, actually, that's another big thing that I didn't mention, that I think if people don't put that in, or how they're going to actually get those sources of funding, I think that's really important. I don't know if you all mentioned that earlier, but how you're going to achieve funding is another part that's often missed. That's also very critical, because if you don't put that in, we're definitely asking you as you come out onto campus if you get that far. But if you have that in there, then it kind of creates a nice, okay, I'll do this, and then I'll get some pilot funding, I'll get foundation funding, and then I'll go for a smaller, say, R21 or R03, or, you know, again, a larger foundation funding, and then I'll try going for those larger NIH grants. Kind of chart out for us how you see your trajectory going as well.
Any other questions or comments? They don't have to be questions per se.
I have a comment, which is that I like the idea of having peers that are going through this process as well to kind of share with. And yeah, I'll definitely think about establishing that within my small cohort, but other peers as well, because I imagine as you start this, it's a lot to figure out. And I always appreciate collaboration. So I liked that suggestion.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And the other thing that we've done for each other and continue to do, because sometimes people move universities, is listen to each other's job talks, which is just like what we're talking about. It has to be very individualized to the university and what they're looking for. And so having that network that you can practice your job talks too. And then it comes down to, are they more teaching heavy? Are they more research heavy? And then figuring out how to balance what you're going to say all through that conversation. It could be a 20-minute job talk. It could be an hour presentation that you're giving. So that's a whole nother seminar, but start establishing that network now so that you can rely on each other in the future.
Yeah, and something you can start doing now, we require it in our program, is that you can start writing your teaching statement. And even though you may need to individualize that a bit too towards the institution, or maybe particular values they have around teaching and learning, certainly your philosophy, you can start drafting. And then also, as you start drafting it now, like Dalia, you know, going back to your questions, if you would start drafting your teaching statement now, you might realize like, oh, this actually looks pretty good. I have more experience than I thought I would. Or, wow, yeah, this looks good, but, oh man, did I wish that I had this experience? Let's say if you've never graded before, I really need to get some experience. I know I had one teaching assistant from the Rehab Science program, Travis, in my stats class several years ago. And he really, really enjoyed being a teaching assistant in that class. So then he asked me the next year I taught that class, hey, can I be a TA again in your class? And it was no longer part of the requirements for his program, but he just wanted to do it again and asked if it would be possible for him to teach a few of them, like get more responsibility. And I said, of course. So he did, and he did a fantastic job, so much so that he ended up teaching that course at a given year that we needed a teacher. But that was his way of being creative. Like, it was not a requirement anymore. He just decided to approach me and ask, can I do this again with you? And that was his way of getting more teaching experience.
The other thing that I would recommend is for people to either self-nominate or somebody to nominate you for an award. So if you are a teaching assistant, to really get your name out there, and because it'd be great to be on your CV. And for I believe we give out some to graduating graduate students, because I sit on that committee. So, just think about those opportunities. Can somebody nominate you for an award? Throw yourself out there, get your name in the hat, because it could help make your application shine.
Yeah, unfortunately for the university ones, not all of our students qualify for that, because there's certain criteria, like you need to have a lab section. I mean, it's more than being like, some of our students are TAs, but it's for a limited amount of hours in the classroom with limited kind of assignments. And so then they don't qualify for that. But we have, within our department, we do give excellence awards for teaching, for example. So yeah. Any other last thoughts or questions?
I just wanted to follow up and make sure I had it right. The Justine, the Teaching and Learning Center is where you can work on your statement at Drexel?
Yep. Yep. Just Google their website, and they have all sorts of things. They have like webinars you could attend. You could do a consultation, so you could book a time with somebody. I've been working with, I believe her name is Magdalena, who's been excellent. So I can even recommend somebody to you that you could book, I think, a 30-minute time slot with. And so you bring a sample teaching statement, and then she'll give you feedback and work on it. Yeah. And Darren, thank you. You just put the website in there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. See you guys next week in our next Tuesday topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.